Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, it touches everyone in a profoundly personal way, yet maybe one we rarely confront head on with this level of detail.
Mhm.
Imagine standing at the threshold of a final goodbye. The air is thick with emotion, right? What happens when someone is gone, but the memory of their requests or maybe promises made to them in that really vulnerable moment lingers? It's like an unspoken weight.
Yeah, it really is. It's this space where raw human emotion,
Yeah.
complex ethical questions, and the often, unyielding logic of the law just collide.
Exactly, in ways that are frequently uncomfortable, but always, always fascinating.
What's truly captivating here is how deeply ingrained these ideas are. Obligation, respect, enduring influence. They're just woven into our human experience.
Right.
Even as, philosophical treatises, legal systems, even personal guidance on grief are still grappling with the practical side, the contradictions. We just feel this pull.
Yeah.
And this deep dive, it's really custom tailored to help you navigate this intricate landscape. We've pulled from a truly rich stack of sources today. Everything from rigorous philosophical analyses and detailed legal discussions to very practical, compassionate advice for people actually in the throes of mourning.
So our mission today is pretty clear. We want to unpack this complex question. Are we truly bound by words spoken to those who are no longer with us?
A huge question.
Huge. We'll delve into how legal systems try to navigate this incredibly nuanced space, what it means for our understanding of autonomy,
Yeah.
that fundamental right to self-determination even beyond life itself.
Yeah.
And ultimately why all of this matters to you, whether you face this directly or, well, might someday. Okay, let's unpack this. It's a journey into a very human space.
Indeed. It's a journey that reveals a great deal about our societal values and our individual psychology, too.
Okay, so let's begin with maybe the most immediate, the most visceral aspect of this, the intensely personal experience. Making promises at the threshold of death. Being at a loved one's bedside as death approaches is often, as one of our sources puts it, scary, usually sad, and very emotional.
Understatement.
Totally. In those incredibly charged moments, we're generally not thinking with our mind, but feeling with our heart. It's just this raw, vulnerable state, not just for the dying person, but for everyone there.
Precisely. And the profound emotional weight of that moment, those final interactions, they can leave such a lasting imprint.
Yeah.
The aftermath of death often involves, reliving the moments over and over. It's relentless sometimes.
Oh, I can imagine.
And this relentless reliving can lead to a cascade of difficult, often agonizing emotions, regrets, guilt, and I wish I had thoughts. And it's right there in that extraordinarily sensitive emotional space that what we call deathbed promises often emerge.
Right. Those commitments made in the grip of sadness, fear, confusion.
Exactly. And we often feel absolutely held hostage to the words of the moment.
Wow, held hostage. That's a strong phrase.
It is, because they represent the last direct interaction we had with someone we loved, or maybe even someone the relationship was complicated with.
Yeah, that too.
The feeling can be just overwhelmingly intense, almost as if the very finality of death binds us irrevocably to those words.
And this isn't just an abstract idea, is it? This isn't some theoretical debate just for philosophers or lawyers.
Not at all.
This is deeply personal, surprisingly universal. Many of us listening right now will face, or maybe have already faced, this exact scenario. Grappling with final moments, final wishes. The sheer weight of that last conversation, those last words, it can feel immense, like a responsibility that transcends even death itself.
Absolutely. And that immense weight very often manifests as guilt, shame, and regret.
Ah, the big three.
Yeah. These are what psychologists call self-conscious emotions. They're emotions we have about ourselves.
Okay.
They arise when we judge our own actions, or crucially our inactions, against our internal moral compass, our values, the societal rules we've kind of absorbed. Our sources emphasize their backward-looking nature. You feel them now, in the present, but they're triggered by these vivid memories of past events.
That makes sense.
And in the context of grief, it's actually considered instinctive and necessary to go backward before we can go forward.
Interesting. So revisiting the past isn't necessarily a bad thing in grief.
No, it's part of the process. We revisit the past to integrate the loss, to start understanding how to live life without that person physically present, to reconcile what was first with what now is.
And these feelings, the guilt, shame, regret, They tend to live in the deep, dark corners, don't they? They like to hide.
They absolutely do. They fester in secret. And that secrecy, especially during grief, is truly not your friend if you hope to heal.
Yeah, I can see that.
If these profound feelings are kept hidden, unspoken, unacknowledged, they can lead to what's known as disenfranchised grief.
Disenfranchised grief, what's that exactly?
It's a type of suffering where your mourning isn't fully acknowledged or supported by your community, by society. Maybe the relationship wasn't recognized, or the cause of death is stigmatized, or maybe people just don't understand the depth of your loss.
Ah, okay. So keeping guilt secret makes that worse.
It can, yeah. It makes the already arduous process of healing even more challenging, more isolating. The message from our research is crystal clear. All your feelings, especially guilt, need to be brought into the light, acknowledged, shared if possible.
Bringing them into the light, that's powerful.
Indeed. It's often counterintuitive, right?
Right.
Because guilt feels so bad. But while prolonged guilt is undeniably destructive, it's vital to recognize the inherent utility of guilt itself.
Utility. Guilt has a use.
It does. It exists for a reason.
Yeah.
It plays a significant role in our moral and social fabric. It actively encourages responsible behavior, helps us understand morality's complexities, directs us to consider others' needs and feelings. It acts as vital guardrails for society, protecting vulnerable individuals, safeguarding the cohesion of families, communities.
Like a social glue, almost.
In a way, yeah. And on a personal level, it actively nurtures empathy that lets us connect more deeply with others' suffering. But like almost all human emotions, moderation is key.
Right.
When guilt becomes prolonged, overwhelming, turns inward, it transforms from a useful signal into something really damaging.
And the damage, wow, it can be incredibly extensive, affecting us on multiple levels. Physically, right?
Yes, physically.
Yeah.
Prolonged guilt triggers the sustained release of stress hormones, mainly cortisol.
Ah, cortisol. The bad one.
Well, useful in short bursts, but chronic stress.
No.
That's bad. It can lead to a whole host of serious health issues. Persistently high blood pressure,
Yeah.
increased risk of heart disease, higher susceptibility to diabetes, clinical depression, anxiety disorders.
It even dampens the immune system, right? Makes you more vulnerable.
Exactly. Our source vividly describes this physical burden. It can
Yeah.
feel literally heavy, like a weight on your chest or an anchor dragging you down, making even simple physical tasks, daily routines, feel monumentally difficult. It's fascinating and distressing how deeply our emotional states manifest physically.
It truly is fascinating. That weight isn't just a metaphor.
Not at all. It's the real physiological response to chronic stress, to that cortisol flooding your system. It slows you down, drains your energy, makes simple tasks feel huge because your body's in this constant state of alert, fighting an invisible enemy, your own self-reproach.
And emotionally.
Emotionally, as our source bluntly puts it, guilt feels bad emotionally. That's probably why you've picked up this book. It hurts. It's just inherently painful.
Yeah.
Socially, it profoundly lowers self-esteem, leads to avoiding others, creates isolation. It builds this wall you're building around your heart, blocking genuine affection, companionship, community support.
Wow, that's isolating.
Extremely. And spiritually, it can shut one down completely. Makes you feel profoundly isolated, hindering the capacity to experience things like awe, gratitude, joy.
So it impacts every part of life, really.
Pretty much. It's clear that guilt is an emotion meant to be experienced, processed, worked through, not inhabited forever like a permanent home.
So the big question then is, how do we find relief? How do we move forward from this heavy burden?
The advice from our sources is incredibly powerful and actually quite practical. First, recognize that these feelings, guilt, shame, regret, they're not your enemy.
Okay, that's a shift in perspective.
It is. They are there, surprisingly, to teach you about your past actions, your thoughts, how you might make different choices moving forward.
So listen to them.
Yes. To befriend your feelings, as the guidance suggests, is to be truly present to them. Turn toward them with compassion, understanding, rather than trying to push them away or ignore them.
Befriend your feelings. I like that.
And then it's absolutely crucial to restoratively express that guilt. Talk openly, honestly, to trusted family members, friends.
Talking, sharing it.
Yes. Guilt in particular requires social review and affirmation. Why? Because it's fundamentally based on self-judgment against social rules, expectations. Sharing it brings it into the light.
Right.
It allows for vital empathy, understanding, normalization, which are key steps towards healing, getting it out of your own head.
So don't keep it locked away.
Definitely not. One of our sources, Barbara Carnes, RN, a very experienced hospice nurse, offers particularly practical and compassionate advice specifically on deathbed promises.
Okay, what does she say?
She suggests that generally we are not bound to those promises.
Wow, really? That might sound surprising, maybe even liberating to a lot of people.
I think so. The core principle she advocates is a crucial shift in perspective. The paramount principle underlying the promise needs to be, how will the outcome of the promise affect the living?
Focus on the living, not the dead person who can't be harmed anyway.
Exactly. It's a profound reframing. Moving the focus from the impossible to harm deceased person to the tangible, immediate impact on those still here, navigating their lives, their grief.
That makes a lot of sense, practically speaking.
And she even offers a concrete, deeply symbolic coping mechanism for those grappling with such promises.
Okay.
If you choose, for valid reasons, not to honor a deathbed promise, she suggests you write a letter to the person who has died.
Write a letter.
Yes. Tell them in the letter why you cannot fulfill what you said you would while in the moment of sadness and confusion before their death. Write it all out. Cry it all out. No one will see this letter, so put all your feelings, positive and negative, on that paper.
Get it all out on paper.
All of it.
Yeah?
And then here's the powerful ritual part. Now burn it. Burn the paper, scatter the ashes.
Burn it. Wow. That's quite symbolic.
Highly symbolic. The act of writing, expressing, burning, scattering, it's designed to help you consider the promise now complete.
Right, like a release.
Exactly. And empower you to move forward in your grief. It's a truly potent ritual. It acknowledges the emotional weight while providing a pathway to let it go.
Does it work? Is there evidence?
Well, we have an anecdote from the source that illustrates this beautifully, even when no direct promise was involved. A person named Janet, who had a sometimes challenging relationship with her deceased mother,
Okay.
found writing and burning a letter to her profoundly helpful in processing her grief. The act of expressing her complex feelings, her confusion, wishes for a closer relationship, even if unheard by the deceased. It provided immense emotional relief, a pathway to healing.
So the act of processing itself, even symbolically, can be incredibly restorative.
It seems so. It underscores that point powerfully.
That's a truly powerful personal perspective on the raw emotional weight of these final moments and promises. But naturally, this leads us to an even deeper, maybe more abstract question that philosophers have wrestled with for centuries. Are promises to the dead truly binding? To even begin to unpack that, we have to start by asking, what exactly is a promise? It sounds simple, but it's far from it, right?
Indeed. Understanding the foundational theories of promises is absolutely essential if we want to grapple with the complexities of posthumous obligations. One prominent philosophical view is the normative power theory.
Okay, normative power theory, what's the core idea?
This perspective suggests that when you make a promise, you're not just uttering words, you obligate yourself directly by your own powers.
By my own powers. How?
It's about actively creating a special kind of power we have over our normative circumstances. You fundamentally alter the existing moral independence of the party's freedom of choice.
Okay, altering moral independence. Unpack that a bit.
Think about it. It establishes a new moral relationship. The promise, the person you promise something to, gains a temporary authority or sovereignty over your will regarding the specific action you promised.
So it's like I'm willingly giving them a temporary, say, remote control over my will in that specific limited area.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Yes.
You're committing your will to their authority in that instant.
Interesting. Okay, what's another major view?
Another major school of thought is conventionalism. This theory argues that promises are ontologically dependent upon the convention, meaning they could not exist or could not be properly understood as promises without the promising convention.
So it's like a social construct, a game with rules.
Exactly. It's a bit like a game with established rules. Within conventionalism, there are a couple of flavors.
Okay.
Ontological conventionalism suggests promises are moves in a promising game, much like a home run is a move in baseball. That was John Rawls' analogy.
Right. Without baseball rules, it's just hitting a ball far.
Precisely. Without the established societal convention of promising, uttering certain words doesn't create a binding promise. Then there's normative conventionalism, which goes a crucial step further.
How so?
It argues the convention itself is the source of the moral justification for promissory obligation. So we're fundamentally obligated to keep promises because there's a convention saying we should, and that convention is valuable for fostering trust and cooperation in society.
So the obligation comes from the social rule itself.
Yes. essentially. And you mentioned hybrid theories earlier.
Yeah, I think I've heard of those, blending different ideas.
You're absolutely right. Some theories cleverly blend conventionalism, often to explain how trust is initially established through a shared understanding with other elements, like expectational views, which address the harm done by betraying that trust.
Okay.
Philosophers like Thomas Hobbes and David Hume, in their own ways, touched on these hybrids, acknowledging both the social construct and the real consequences when promises are broken.
Which brings us quite naturally to the expectation theory. This one feels, well, pretty intuitive on the surface.
It does, doesn't it?
It claims that promises are designed to invoke expectations of performance in the promisee, and that the betrayal of those expectations is the wrong in breaking a promise, and thus the source of the promissory obligation.
That's a perfect articulation.
Yeah.
If I promise to water your plants while you're away, you pack your bags expecting there to happen.
Right. I'm counting on it.
And if I don't, the wrong isn't just about the plants potentially dying. It's about me betraying the certainty I gave you, the knowledge you relied on.
Okay, so it's about the expectation itself.
A key figure here is T.M. Scanlon, and his principle F is a really detailed and influential version of expectation theory.
Principle F, what does it say?
It states that if person A voluntarily and intentionally leads B to expect X, and both parties know this, then A must do X unless B consents to X is not being done.
Unless B lets them off the hook.
Exactly. The profound insight here is that the wrong isn't necessarily material loss, but an epistemic disappointment, a disappointment of knowledge or certainty.
Epistemic, so related to knowledge.
Yes, you were led to believe something, you built your understanding around it, and that understanding was then betrayed. That's the core wrong.
Okay, and what about reliance views? Are they different from just expectation?
Yes, they're a bit more stringent, championed by philosophers like Judith Jarvis Thompson. Reliance views argue that for a wrong to have occurred, the promisee must in fact suffer from some loss or harm.
Ah, so actual harm is needed, not just disappointed expectation.
Right. In this view, a promise is seen as an invitation to rely. The promisee isn't just passively expecting, they're actively planning, shaping their future behavior, making decisions based on that promise performance. They're putting something at stake.
Making plans based on the promise. Got it.
And finally, there are trust views, from thinkers like Friedrich and Southwood. They see promises fundamentally as invitations to trust.
Trust. How's that different from reliance or expectation?
They argue trust is subtly more demanding than expectation or reliance, encompassing a deeper, more vulnerable interpersonal connection. It's not just about predicting behavior, but about entrusting part of your well-being to another.
Okay, so multiple layers to what a promise even is.
Exactly. And this deep dive into the nature of promises itself immediately raises that crucial question. If the very nature of a promise relies on the promisee's ability to have expectations, to feel trust, or to hold authority over the promiser's will, what then happens when the promisee is no longer physically present to have those expectations, feel that trust, or exercise that authority?
Exactly. That's the core challenge with promises to the dead, isn't it? Our sources call the deceased problematic promisees. Individuals who can't be disappointed or harmed in the usual sense because they simply cannot satisfy the typical uptake conditions of a promise.
Right. Those conditions like awareness, acknowledgement, the capacity for expectation, the dead just don't meet them.
And promises to the dead or dying are the paradigm example of this fundamental problem.
Furthermore, for some expectation views, there's a tricky circularity problem that becomes really acute with the dead.
Circularity. How so?
If the promisee's trust is considered the fundamental source of the obligation, how can a promisee trust that a promise will be kept before the obligation to keep it even exists?
Ah, the chicken and egg problem.
Kind of. It creates this illogical loop that's hard to resolve, especially when the promisee is no longer sentient or capable of engaging in that dynamic. It's like saying, I'll only trust you if you promise to do X, but the only reason you're obligated to do X is because I trust you.
Right, folds back on itself, especially if one party is gone.
Exactly. And philosophers, no, they love their thought experiments, don't they?
Oh yeah, the desert island case. Is that the one?
That's the classic one.
Yeah.
It highlights this very problem. Imagine a promise made in total isolation to someone who then immediately dies. No one else knows.
Okay. Just me and the promise on the island.
Right. The crucial question is, does any obligation remain? Given the promisee is dead, can't have expectations, can't be harmed, no one else knows. Is it purely my own conscience, or is there still some residual moral obligation?
That's a tough one. What do the philosophers say?
Well, they grapple with it. Some argue that without a living party to experience disappointment or enforce the promise, the moral obligation just dissipates, becomes purely an internal matter of integrity. Others contend that the promise, once made, creates a moral fact, a kind of reality, that persists regardless of external awareness or the promisee's state.
A moral fact. Interesting.
This leads to really divergent philosophical views on posthumous promises. Ashley Dressel, for instance, argues quite forcefully that there is no reason to believe that promissory obligations can be owed to people who are dead.
No reason at all. That's strong.
Her point is that typical accounts, like the authority account where the promisee gains authority, or the harm-based view, simply cannot directly justify an obligation to a non-sentient being. There's no authority to wield, no harm to feel.
Okay, that logic seems sound on its face, but is there a counter-argument?
Oh, yes. James Stacey Taylor pushes back significantly. While he kind of concedes that traditional accounts might not directly justify posthumous obligations, he argues that the received view that we should keep our promises to the dead is mistaken, which is a remarkably strong statement.
Wow. Okay, so what's his argument then?
He offers a crucial twist. He shifts the focus entirely. He argues that the obligation to keep promises to the dead could be justified on the grounds that not to do so would adversely affect the living.
So it's not about the dead person anymore, but about the ripple effect on everyone else.
Precisely. His argument shifts the moral calculus away from the deceased and firmly onto the tangible impact on those still alive. It's about the consequences for their loved ones, for society, for the very notion of trust itself.
That's a really interesting reframing, grounding it in the here and now.
It's profoundly significant because it grounds the obligation in the tangible current world, not the abstract realm of the deceased's rights. And it's a perspective we see implicitly reflected in broader public discourse, too.
Like that Reddit debate you mentioned.
Exactly, that Reddit thread on, is it immoral to break a promise to someone after they've died? Many users felt it depends on the promise and other contextual factors.
Context matters. Always.
The general consensus seemed to align with a common ethical principle that prima facie breaking a promise is bad.
Prima facie. Meaning on the face of it,
Yeah.
or at first glance, right?
Exactly. Inherently, without looking at other factors, breaking a promise appears wrong. It's the default position.
Okay.
And the Reddit users were basically saying, unless circumstances are sufficient to overcome that default badness, perhaps it is moral to break the promise to a dead person.
That makes a lot of sense, intuitively. Did they give examples?
Yeah, some great contrasting ones. Breaking a promise like you won't get a tattoo after someone dies is generally seen as fine, or at least not morally terrible.
Okay, relatively minor.
But then they offer a counterpoint. If the promise was, promise me you'll never go back to drinking. Imagine that plea from a loved one worried about your health.
Well, yeah, much higher stakes.
Then breaking that promise would more likely be immoral because the nature of the promise is directly tied to the living person's well-being and the potentially devastating impact of their action.
Right, it echoes that argument about affecting the living.
It does. It echoes the complexities you find in hypotheticals, like that TED-Ed video about Zaina, who promises her racist grandparent she'll never date someone from a particular group.
Oh, that's a tough one. What should Zaina do?
Exactly. It forces you to weigh the initial promise against your own moral compass, your evolving values, the impact on your own life, the lives of others. There's no easy answer.
And this kind of reasoning, this weighing of outcomes, it can also lead to critiques of purely utilitarian views, can it?
Absolutely. If you only look for a net increase in happiness or the greatest good for the greatest number, you could theoretically justify a lot of questionable behavior.
Like the example of stealing from a rich person because it makes you happier.
Right. Stealing $100 because your happiness boost outweighs their minor unhappiness. The source warns that you can justify and rationalize a lot of questionable behavior using this kind of reasoning if you apply it too broadly without other ethical guardrails.
So morality isn't just a simple math problem.
Not at all. It's deeply nuanced, context-dependent.
Like, here's where it gets really interesting for me. We're seeing this direct clash between deeply held personal feelings, that agonizing guilt, rigorous philosophical reasoning about what obligation even means, and the messiness of real-world morality where context is king. So what does this all mean when we bring in the legal system? How does the law even begin to grapple with this intricate dance between life, death, and enduring promises?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the legal system often tries to handle these profound tensions by adopting what's broadly called the interest theory of rights.
Interest theory.
Yeah,
Okay.
this approach attempts, with let's say varying degrees of success, to recognize a form of agency or continued influence that extends beyond the grave.
But it's such a paradox, isn't it? On one hand, lots of legal rules clearly suggest the dead don't have rights. They can't marry, divorce, vote. Medical privacy erodes significantly, and a state usually can't sue for libel or slander for the deceased. Seems pretty cut and dried. You're gone, your legal personhood is mostly extinguished too.
That's the common perception, absolutely. Yet, almost immediately, you can point to numerous areas where various legal institutions have spent considerable time trying to protect the rights of the dead.
Like what?
Think about honoring someone's will and testament, their testamentary distributions, or specific burial requests, organ donation designations. These are almost universally upheld by law, even if they conflict with the immediate preferences of living family.
Okay, yeah, wills are a big one.
And then there's the well-established posthumous right of publicity for celebrities. We think Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe. Their estates control their image use.
Right, the image rights.
And even more recently, evolving case law suggests there might be a developing posthumous right to reproductive autonomy, which is super complex.
Wow, okay, so the law isn't entirely hands-off. It carved out specific zones of influence for the deceased.
Exactly. So the law is clearly sending mixed signals.
That's where these competing theories of legal rights try to make sense of this apparent contradiction, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned the interest theory.
Yes, the article we're drawing from largely adopts an interest theory approach to rights.
How does that theory work specifically for the dead who obviously can't assert their own rights anymore?
The interest theory is quite expansive. It recognizes that persons currently incapable of making choices, like the mentally incapacitated or infants, can still be considered potential right holders. Their interests are recognized and protected by law, even if they can't speak for themselves.
Okay, so apply that to the dead.
Applying this, the theory argues that, although unable to make real-time choices, the dead are capable of being legal right holders because certain interests can survive death.
What kind of interests?
Things like the interest in seeing one's offspring survive or the interest in one's reputation. When these deeply personal interests get legal protection, the dead are effectively granted de facto legal rights that can be enforced against the living.
De facto rights. So rights in practice, even if not explicitly named everywhere.
Pretty much. So if someone spreads horrible lies about a deceased person, harming their reputation, the interest theory says that's a harm to the decedent's interest.
Even though the dead person can't know or feel it.
Right. The fact they don't know does not mean that a harm to the decedent's interest has not occurred. The comparison made is to a living landowner unaware of a trespass, the legal harm still happens. The right is violated regardless of awareness.
Okay, that analogy helps. The core idea then is...
The core idea is that the law strives to honor a decedent's wishes and protect their interests because society has chosen, within limits, to adhere to the principle of autonomy.
Autonomy again, extending it beyond life.
Exactly. It's society's way of saying, your choices, your interests, your essence, they still matter even when you're gone. It reflects a societal value.
But there's a counterpoint, right? The will theory.
Yes. The will theory offers a compelling alternative perspective. It argues that laws appearing to grant posthumous rights are really aimed at controlling the behavior of living persons.
Controlling the living? How?
So a posthumous right of publicity, for instance. Will theory says it isn't truly about Elvis's right from the grave. It's mainly about incentivizing living people to create marketable identities and, crucially, protecting the financial interests of his heirs after his death. It's all about regulating the living and their incentives.
So it's more practical, maybe more cynical, focused on the living beneficiaries.
You could see it that way. And while there's certainly some truth to the will theory's claim, these rules do often benefit the living, like protecting an estate's value. Our source argues it ultimately fails to completely explain many legal rulings and does not comport with ordinary legal or social discourse, meaning it doesn't quite line up with how we usually talk about or understand these rights. Judges, in their rulings, consistently use rights talk when discussing decedents. That implies a deeper recognition of their continuing legal status than just controlling the living. If it were only about the living, the language in court decisions would likely be very different.
Okay, so the way we talk about it legally suggests we do believe the dead retain some form of rights or interests.
The language certainly points that way.
This focus on autonomy, even after death, it seems like a crucial thread, especially in end-of-life care.
Absolutely. Autonomy is considered a patient's right to self-determination. It's explicitly recognized as one of the fundamental principles of medical ethics, bedrock stuff.
And this is where advanced directives, ADs, come in, right? They seem like the most direct tool for this.
Exactly. These are oral and/or written instructions about the future medical care of a patient in the event he or she becomes unable to communicate and loses the ability to make decisions for any reason.
So things like living wills, healthcare proxies, DNR orders.
Precisely. They are tools specifically designed to extend a patient's autonomy beyond their capacity to communicate in the moment. They let you speak when you can no longer speak.
They seem like such a clear, direct way to maintain control.
They absolutely are, and the benefits are incredibly significant for the patient and their loved ones.
How so?
ADs help ensure that patients receive the care they want, their preferred treatments, or maybe declining certain interventions. And crucially, they guide the patient's family members in dealing with the decision-making burden.
Oh, that's huge, taking that weight off the family.
Immense. Relieving them of those agonizing choices in a moment of crisis. ADs can also limit the use of expensive, invasive, and useless care not requested by patients, preserving resources, avoiding unnecessary suffering.
Is there research on their effectiveness?
Yes, strong research shows ADs improve the quality of end-of-life care and reduce the burden of care without increasing mortality. They really do make a profound, tangible difference.
Okay, so they're really important tools. Given that, what's the established hierarchy for making these tough decisions when a patient can't communicate and maybe doesn't have an AD?
The hierarchy is quite clear, designed to prioritize the patient's autonomy as much as possible. First priority, the patient themselves, if they have capacity.
Right.
If they've lost capacity, then decisions follow the patient's advance directive, if one exists.
Okay.
Second in line is the designated proxy healthcare agent, if one was named.
The person they chose.
Yes. If there's no AD or proxy, then decision-making authority falls to family members, usually in a legally defined order: spouse, adult children, parents, siblings, etc.
And if the family can't decide or isn't there?
As a last resort, if family members avoid decisions or can't agree, the healthcare team must step in, basing their decision on the patient's likely wishes or best interests.
And the physician's role in all this?
Physicians have a duty to provide detailed information, benefits, limitations, disadvantages of treatments. While respecting patient autonomy is key, physicians can ethically withdraw from the patient's care if they insist on medically futile or harmful treatments.
So they don't have to provide treatment they believe is harmful or won't work.
Correct. They need to explain why it won't benefit the patient. The emphasis is that preserving life shouldn't mean using unnecessary resources for futile ends.
And this area, of course, isn't without major controversies like euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, still hotly debated.
Very much so. Huge ethical and legal debates continue there. Even in emergency settings, the goal is to support life through all possible means unless an advance directive requests otherwise.
Default to preserving life, unless told otherwise?
Generally, yes. The guiding principle there is the best treatment option is the one that provides the most general benefit and is the least restrictive for the patient's future choices. Always trying to involve patients and families ASAP.
How does this differ for specific groups, like children or the elderly? The considerations must be different.
Absolutely distinct. In pediatric end-of-life care, decisions are always framed by the child's best interests, weighing benefits, burdens, risks.
Best interests of the child.
Yes. Generally, kids under 18 lack full legal decision-making capacity, though there are exceptions: pregnant minors, married minors, emancipated minors.
But should kids have any say at all?
Interestingly, and quite empathetically, our sources highlight that children above the age of 6 should be informed about decisions regarding their end-of-life care and that their preferences should be taken into account.
Even if they don't have the final legal say.
Right. It acknowledges their emerging understanding, their emotional needs. It respects them as people. Importantly, parents' decisions here are not absolute. They can be challenged via ethics committees or courts if deemed harmful or not truly in the child's best interest.
Okay. And for elderly patients, often more complex medical histories, maybe cognitive issues.
For the elderly, ethical issues often revolve around improving quality of life, helping them cope with illness, disability, death, and an honorable death process.
Quality of life focus.
Yes. Physicians are strongly encouraged to do advanced life planning for their elderly patients, proactively discussing wishes and values while they still have full capacity. Don't wait for a crisis.
That seems wise.
This holistic approach also underpins the growing importance of palliative and hospice care. They aren't aiming to cure, but to improve quality of life with less acute healthcare use and in moderately lower symptom burden.
Comfort and dignity.
Exactly. And remarkable research even suggests palliative care can increase the quality of life and life expectancy for terminal ill patients by focusing on those things. The ethical principles of beneficence, doing good, and non-maleficence, avoiding harm, are paramount here.
So to wrap up this section on end-of-life care, it sounds like the key is really open communication and shared decision-making.
That's the bottom line. Among healthcare providers, patients, families, it would avoid so many ethical dilemmas. Clear conversation is key.
Okay, so what stands out to you, the listener here? How do these principles of end-of-life care, so focused on the dying patient's autonomy, how do they translate, or maybe fail to translate, once death actually occurs? It's clear the legal system is really wrestling with how far that autonomy can genuinely extend beyond the grave.
That's a great question, and it leads us right into the very real limitations the law puts on posthumous autonomy and rights. It seems the first, and maybe most absolute, barrier is simply impossibility.
Impossibility. Makes sense. If a dead person literally cannot perform an action, or the right requires their active participation, the law generally can't recognize a posthumous right for it.
It's the ultimate threshold factor. Take pre-mortem personal services contracts.
Okay, what are those?
Contracts for someone's unique skill or talent. These end without further obligation at the death of the promisor because it is impossible to complete the contract.
Like the artist example. Hired to paint something, but dies.
Exactly. The patron can't sue the artist's estate to force completion of the painting. Why? Because no one else can replicate that unique talent. The specific personal service is impossible once the artist is gone.
But that's totally different from financial obligations, right? If I owe money, my death doesn't just erase the debt.
Precisely. The patron's estate can still be held liable for payment if the artist finished the work before dying. And more broadly, a simple promise to pay money almost always survives the death of the promisor.
Why the difference?
It highlights a key distinction. The estate is capable of functioning as an accurate proxy for financial obligations. Money is fungible, transferable. But the estate isn't a perfect substitute for highly personal services relying on the unique individual.
Okay, impossibility makes sense for personal services. What about constitutional rights?
This concept extends there too. Many fundamental rights, vital in life, simply die with the decedent because death makes their active exercise impossible, a stark reminder of physical finality.
Like voting rights.
Prime example, the constitutional right to vote generally dies with the decedent due to impossibility on two fronts. Mental competency, forming preferences, making choices, and physical presence needed to cast a ballot.
Right. Can't think, can't show up.
Even if someone could theoretically express a desire to vote from the grave, the mechanisms just aren't there.
Our sources had that funny thought experiment, right? Someone leaving a will saying they want to vote Republican after his death.
Yes. Instructing their estate administrator to cast his ballot every year for all Republicans running for office sounds absurd, but highlights the legal issues.
What are the main problems with that?
Several. First, social or economic changes might have affected the decedent's voting preferences. Their true intent might be totally different if they were alive today.
Okay, their views might have changed.
Second, and crucially, the decedent doesn't have to live with the consequences of his decision. They aren't impacted by the outcome. This could distort his preferences in ways that have severe negative consequences for the living, who do have to live with the results.
So even a fix like choosing a proxy voter, a like-minded person with instructions, still doesn't really solve it because of those living consequences. Seems almost undemocratic.
Precisely. The conflict with the interests of the living is a huge barrier. Yet, despite all this, it's likely that the dead occasionally vote. Think about someone who dies after mailing an absentee ballot, but before Election Day. Should her vote count? Sometimes it does, by an accident of sorts. So, in practice, some decedents are granted the right to vote, even if not by explicit legal design. Messy reality.
Okay. The right to marry is another clear one that does not extend to someone who is dead, right?
Yeah.
Impossibility, again, vows, consent, competency.
Correct. You can't legally marry a corpse, period.
Yeah.
However, there's a really fascinating contrast when we look at marital privileges after death.
Privileges? How's that different from the right?
While the right to marry ends, some significant privileges of marriage continue beyond death for the surviving spouse. Surviving spouses can file joint taxes for 2 years, receive crucial Social Security benefits, and estates passing entirely to a spouse do not owe estate taxes at the time of the decedent's death.
Ah, so significant financial benefits continue. Why?
This is often seen as coinciding with the decedent's presumed wishes. The benefit to the living spouse aligns with the generally accepted, presumed intent of the dead, recognizing the ongoing family unit. It respects the prior relationship.
Okay, so the law draws a fairly clear line on impossibility. Some things are just too personal, require too much active participation. But where does that line get fuzzy? What else limits these posthumous allowances?
Well, beyond impossibility, the importance of the right and broader societal values also play a crucial role. How much weight do we, as a society, place on a particular right?
Meaning some rights are seen as more important, so courts might try harder to uphold them posthumously.
Exactly. Even if the financial gain to the estate is minimal, freedom of speech is a good example.
How so?
Our sources discuss a case where a deceased plaintiff's free speech case was pursued by the estate, even for a small dollar amount. The court recognized the importance of the question presented, the underlying principle. This suggested the executor acted solely for the benefit of the decedent, upholding the principle, not just chasing money for heirs.
So society values free speech enough to protect it even after death, for its own sake.
It implies that, yes, it's a statement about our values. Another huge area driven by perceived importance and technology is reproductive autonomy.
Right, you mentioned this earlier, a fundamental constitutional right for the living.
Absolutely. And tech advances have dramatically expanded possibilities for posthumous reproduction, leading to incredibly complex legal and ethical questions.
What kinds of cases are we talking about?
Mainly 2 types, using frozen sperm or embryos after a donor's death, and tragically, babies born to brain-dead pregnant women kept on life support.
Okay. For frozen sperm or embryos, what's the rule?
The law is generally quite strict. It's only allowed where there is a clear intent on the part of the decedent to reproduce posthumously. This intent usually needs to be explicit, often written.
Clear intent is key. What if it's absent?
If that clear intent is absent, the decedent's gametes or embryos are generally destroyed, out of respect for the principle of not creating life without explicit consent.
But this leads to that paradox of intent, right? Explicit intent needed for sperm embryos, but often presumed intent in the maternal brain death cases. Why the difference?
What's fascinating here, is that tension. Explicit intent versus presumed intent, especially when new life emerges. State statutes often invalidate a pregnant woman's advance directive.
Wait, they invalidate her stated wishes?
Often, yes. Effectively assuming she would want to be kept alive to save the fetus, even if her directive said otherwise. This raises huge questions. Is it potential sexism in how male and female reproductive autonomy are treated? Or different interpretations of substituted judgment, the law trying to guess what they would have wanted?
Wow. That's deeply complex, where ethics, tech, and societal views on life just collide.
Absolutely.
Okay, so beyond impossibility and the importance of the right, there are also clear time limits on posthumous influence, aren't there? The dead's influence fades.
Yes, it tends to fade over time, and the law reflects that. We see it clearly with the posthumous right of publicity, those celebrity image rights.
Like Elvis or Marilyn Monroe again?
Exactly. That right is typically limited to a specific period of time, maybe 70 years in California, only 20 years in Virginia. After that, their image enters the public domain, free for anyone.
Why the limit?
It acknowledges that the decedent's legal rights also tend to fade, as their direct connection to living memory and commercial value diminishes over generations, a legal recognition of historical distance.
Makes sense. And finally, perhaps the most confounding factor, conflicts of interest between the living and the dead, where an unspoken balancing test often decides things.
This is often where the rubber meets the road. An unspoken balancing act, where the interests of the living frequently override the autonomy or wishes of the dead.
How does this play out with wills, with testamentary powers?
Well, the general rule is strong. A testator may dispose of his or her property in any way he or she desires. You could even exclude his child or children, or give a greater share to one child than to another. As one old saying goes, a man's prejudices are part of his liberty.
Wow. You have a lot of freedom there. What about those conditional bequests? Money only if you do X.
Yes. Testamentary distributions conditioned on religious requirements or marrying someone of a specific ethnicity are often generally valid.
Really? That seems controlling.
The unrestated Cephalus case is a key example. A bequest conditioned on sons marrying someone of true Greek blood and descent and of Orthodox religion was upheld. The court found it didn't promote divorce, even though it restricted choice.
So courts haven't treated these as unconstitutional restraints on the living.
Generally not, surprisingly. They see it as the testator's right to dispose of their property as they see fit, within limits.
But there are limits, right? Especially if it's purely destructive or extraordinarily wasteful. You can't order your executor to burn your priceless art.
Precisely. Courts absolutely limit a testator's autonomy there.
Yeah.
If it involves destroying valuable pieces of art, manuscripts, and property, it's often deemed against public policy. The societal interest in preserving value overrides the individual's destructive posthumous dictate.
Okay. Another conflict area, posthumous medical privacy. IPA and state laws protect medical info, cause of death, etc., even after death.
Yes, ensuring dignity and privacy. But this immediately creates conflict with the public's interest in public health, population, and genealogical information. Researchers, genealogists want that data.
So how's that balanced?
It's a constant balancing act. Medical info is typically private, but exceptions allow access for direct descendants, or after a specified period of time, maybe 100 years. Some states even create two types of death certificates, a full one for authorized people, a cleaned-up public version.
That suggests states are trying to protect the dead's privacy for reasons beyond just identity theft, right? Like dignity.
It implies a respect for dignity, yes,
Yeah.
more than just practical concerns.
And what about pre-mortem contracts binding the living? Agreements made while alive that continue after death.
Yes, these are contracts entered into by living people that can indeed bind the next of kin, or the estate, often imposing fairly heavy financial obligations.
Like what kind of agreements?
Things related to arbitration of claims, settlement of claims, assumption of risk agreements. If you sign an arbitration agreement for a service, then die, your estate might still be bound to arbitrate disputes, not sue in court.
So the contract outlives the person who signed it.
In many cases, yes, it demonstrates the law's deep respect for autonomous decisions that extend beyond the grave, even when they directly impact the living heirs financially.
So why should you, our listener, care about these specific legal distinctions? Testamentary powers, medical privacy, pre-mortem contracts.
Well, these decisions directly impact inheritances, profoundly shape family dynamics, and absolutely affect your legal standing and responsibilities after a loved one passes. The fine print of posthumous rights can have very real-world consequences for your finances, your relationships, your peace of mind. It's not just theoretical.
Definitely not. Okay, so it's a fascinating dilemma. How do you ensure the wishes of someone who can no longer speak are truly honored, especially with living interests and practical challenges? This leads us to enforcement and the principal agent problem when the principal, the decedent, is literally missing.
Yeah, the absence of the principal creates huge challenges. A lack of oversight for the agent, and crucially, an inability on the agent's part to get clarification on an instruction or further direction. You can't ask the dead person what they really meant.
Right. Executors, heirs, act as proxies, chosen for judgment or maybe motivated by financial benefit.
But these proxies aren't perfect substitutes, are they? Their own judgment, interests, emotions all factor in.
Far from perfect. Studies have starkly shown surrogate healthcare decision makers correctly predict the patient's wishes only 66% of the time.
Oh, wow, only 2/3 accuracy. That's low.
It is, often due to the surrogate's emotional distress or a powerful tendency to prioritize their own desires, like keeping a loved one alive over the deceased's stated wishes in an AD.
The conflict of interest again.
It's highly probable the same conflict of interest applies to other posthumous decisions too, beyond healthcare, where the living proxy's desires might diverge from the deceased's true intent.
Can you give a concrete legal example of this principal agent problem outside of healthcare?
Sure, contract law again. If an offer is made only to a specific person and that person dies before accepting, the offeree's estate generally cannot accept the offer.
Why?
Because the offer was made to a particular individual, changing one of the parties to the agreement changes the offer fundamentally. It implies the estate is not a perfect substitute for the deceased when forming a new bilateral contract based on identity.
Okay. But executors can act in some situations, like contracting for a funeral.
Right. Because those are direct instructions tied to the deceased's remains, generally accepted estate responsibilities, not forming a new personal relationship. It's about the unique nature of the instruction or relationship.
Okay, that distinction makes sense. So looking ahead, you mentioned the trend seems to be towards giving the dead more rights.
It seems as if the trend is to give the dead more rights, yeah. driven by two main
What
factors.
are they?
The first is changing societal views on mortality. As health improves, lifespans extend. Society fears its own mortality, and creating posthumous rights might be one way to avoid this certainty.
Interesting. So, as death becomes less familiar, we try to exert more control over it, even after the fact.
Possibly. In earlier times, death was more accepted, more integrated into daily life. Now, society is arguably less comfortable with its own mortality. Extending influence beyond the grave could be a symbolic defiance, seeking immortality through legacy.
A psychological buffer against mortality.
Mhm.
Makes sense. What's the second factor?
Technological advancements. This is huge. Throughout history, new tech has repeatedly created or expanded rights.
Like the railroads example.
Exactly. Growth of railroads, more accidents led to wrongful death statutes. Inventions of radio and television gave birth to the right of publicity, which eventually led to the creation of a posthumous right of publicity as commercial value persisted.
And we're seeing this accelerate now.
Dramatically. The growth of assisted reproductive technologies in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, IVF, sperm freezing, directly led courts to recognize a posthumous right to reproductive autonomy, planning for kids after death.
Wow. Clear examples of rights once thought to have died with the person now being recognized due to new capabilities and changing perspectives.
So wrapping up, it sounds like it's a constant balancing act, isn't it? Not a static set of rules.
Absolutely. The granting or removing of posthumous rights will always have something to do with the struggle between the interests of the living and the interests of the dead.
A constant battle.
It is, where the living must decide how many rights they're willing to bestow upon the dead, keeping in mind that they may want to safeguard some of their own posthumous rights for when their time comes.
Thinking about our own legacy.
Exactly. This unique balancing act, tempered by impossibility, importance, time limits, will require continuous, careful navigation by courts and legislatures. It's a moving target, adapting to values and technology. A dynamic tension, not a fixed answer.
Okay, so today we've taken a truly deep dive into this complex, often poignant, and surprisingly current world of promises and rights extending beyond life. We've explored the deeply personal weight of deathbed promises, the guilt they can leave. We've unpacked intricate philosophical arguments about obligation, challenging our gut feelings, and we've mapped the evolving legal landscape granting and limiting the rights of the dead. A fascinating interplay of autonomy and societal values.
It's abundantly clear there's a fundamental human desire for autonomy, for respect, that we wish could extend beyond life itself. But this profound desire is continually balanced against practical realities, shifting societal values, and the very real immediate interests of the living. It's a tension reflecting our deepest fears about mortality and our enduring hopes for legacy.
So, a final thought for you, our listener. As society and technology keep advancing, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, after-death digital legacies, new forms of posthumous conception, maybe even AI consciousness down the line, how do you think our very definition of life, death, and obligation will continue to evolve? And what kind of legacy, in terms of your own wishes, your influence, do you hope to leave behind that might challenge or shape the norms for future generations? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.